Hi, everyone, and welcome to Be True, my podcast about the writing I love and the writing I do. I promise I won't rhyme the whole time. It's a truly awful Jerry Seinfeld impression. I mean, just pitiful. I'm John Tessitore, and today, Bridge and Tunnel, a poem from my new little book on self-expression after the revolution. It was originally published in the penultimate issue of the art and literature magazine, Harbinger Asylum. Thank you, my friends. You can find On Self-Expression and all of my work at johntessitore.com. I'm going to read this one first before I start talking at you today. An invitation to, what did she call it? A very upscale orgy. I envision wonderful things, actually, but I never know my mind enough to try. A man should enter every room certain. He should know where to begin. I fear that I will always be my father's son, a person becoming, never become. In Manhattan, I am swivel-headed with eyes too big for my hands, always trying to understand the bright night's surprise and the highs, until I am stunned and slow-tongued like a buck, frozen stiff in the headlights. That's right, a buck who loves to pleasure his limerick brain. Now, holding his own invitation to a very upscale orgy and thinking of heading home again. The next train out of Penn Station, 11:33. In recent weeks, I've read several New York poems on this podcast. 2 of the previous 3, in fact. One was about a childhood memory, so that doesn't really count, just a feature of my autobiography. But this one is specifically about New York City because my book, On Self-Expression, is set in New York City specifically. I'm not sure it could be set anywhere else. The reason is right there at the center of the poem. In Manhattan, I am swivel-headed with eyes too big for my hands, always trying to understand the bright night's surprise and the highs until I am stunned and slow-tongued like a buck frozen stiff in the headlights. New York is overwhelming, even to people who live there. It's everything, all at once. I mean that culturally, it's the world's microcosm, minus nature. There's almost no nature in NYC, but also in terms of power. It's both the center of world capitalism and the place of grinding poverty, one on top of the other. In fact, it's a factory for inequality. Maybe the world's inequality factory. And if you're going to fight the power, as Chuck D tells us to, you have to start in New York. Not in Washington, D.C., where power is more of a performance than a reality, and where the money is scarce, one shitheel senator after another begging for crumbs, or one fake billionaire bought and sold by the real ones. But in New York, where so much of the money that buys D.C. actually comes from. A while ago, I published another little book about New York. For a minute there, it seemed like something was happening. That book examined the sense of hope that came to New York in the mid and late 90s in the purple glow of the dot-com boom. This new book on self-expression is New York without that hope. The money, the glamour, and the excitement remain, but the feeling that we're all already bought and sold has never been stronger. In that sense, and in a spirit of jaded appreciation, it borrows from the work of Frank O'Hara. I love Frank O'Hara. His aura, his echo, his shadow can always be found somewhere in my poems. Not the specifics, maybe not the formal characteristics, but the tone and perspective. O'Hara was a fixture of the New York art scene in the 1950s and early 60s, and his poems chat at you with a kind of midtown pop art Whitmanism. Conversational, full of characters and allusions, usually rather autobiographical, brash, and witty in their voice. I love the richness and fullness and humor of Frank O'Hara's work. For this podcast, I flipped at random to a poem from his wonderful collection, Lunch Poems, and came upon this opening, which reflects back on my own poem, as many of O'Hara's poems would, I'm sure. This is from Rhapsody, just the first 6 lines. 515 Madison Avenue. Door to heaven? Portal. stopped realities, and eternal licentiousness, or at least the jungle of impossible eagerness. Your marble is bronze, and your lianas elevator cables, swinging from the myth of ascending. Can you hear it? Jungle of impossible eagerness. I wish I had included that line in Bridge and Tunnel, because what else is a very upscale orgy but a jungle of impossible eagerness? It's a line about wealth and sex and freedom and excess, all rolled into one. It sounds great. New York, RSVP, sign me up. But do you belong? Are you comfortable? Are you from and of this world? As Jerry Seinfeld might ask, are you an orgy guy? Probably not. Chances are, no one is actually from and of that world. In one way or another, we're all just commuters in and out of different New Yorks all the time. The residents of Manhattan Island love to sneer at the commuters from Long Island and New Jersey. They call them bridge and tunnel folk, which is what I was for a while in a previous life, always heading home to Long Island on the late train from Penn Station, 11:33. But New York is not a place of fixed identities. Everyone on the island is always becoming, never become. People arrive and leave, neighborhoods change, buildings rise and fall. Good block, bad block, I was promoted, I was laid off, I was fired. What are you wearing? We're never one thing for long in New York. And maybe it's the same wherever we are, only more apparent in the chaos and noise and varying fashion of New York City. Maybe we're never one thing for long, anywhere. But there is something about the grinding capitalism of New York that makes us question ourselves relentlessly. That grinding corporate capitalism. Because self-doubt is the engine of corporate capitalism. Just think of the advertising industry, marketing, an industry once centered on O'Hara's own Madison Avenue. The success of advertising is its ability to play on your insecurities. And New Yorkers tend to feel that pressure first because it's all around them. The feeling of, where the hell am I now, is never too far away. So what's the answer? Maybe the answer is to go to the very upscale orgy, or maybe it's to go home for the night. But maybe it's even simpler. Maybe the answer is to resist the self-doubt that drives capitalism and to just be. To just be an orgy guy when you're at the orgy, and just be a homebody when you're home. Maybe that's the beginning of the revolution, because the one thing that corporate capitalism can't deal with is self-awareness, self-ownership, self-confidence. It can't sell what you don't need if you know what you do need, and it can't tell you who to be if you know who you are. And so, in the hope that you receive an invitation to a very upscale orgy someday, whether you attend or not is entirely your choice, but say yes, just this once. This is John Tessitore, concluding another installment of Be True. If you've listened this long, thank you. You can find On Self-Expression After the Revolution and all of my work at johntessitore.com. But first, obviously, go find a copy of Frank O'Hara's Lunch Poems. It's his most popular collection and might even be a cliche if it wasn't so damn good. Special thanks to me for today's theme music, which I call A Chord. Maybe we'll talk again, and if you enjoyed this little podcast, leave some stars or a review, and tell your friends. In the meantime, I gotta feed the dog. All right, Luna, I'm coming. It's awful. It's embarrassing. I shouldn't do it.